I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a single tear. Not in front of them. My name is Claire. I am 32 years old. I am a licensed CPA with 11 years of experience. A woman who has built every corner of her life with precision and patience. I am also a mother to a 7-year-old boy named Marcus who still believes that people are mostly good, and I intend to protect that belief in him for as long as I possibly can. This is the story of the night my husband's family sat around a dining room table in their 4,000 square foot colonial in Naperville, Illinois, and collectively decided that I was no longer welcome among them. It is also the story of what happened exactly 8 days later, when the same people who raised their hands against me learned that the ground beneath their carefully constructed lives had quietly been turning to sand. I want to tell you everything. I want you to understand not just what happened, but why it happened, and how a woman who spent years trying to be enough for people who had already decided she was nothing finally chose to stop trying and started building instead. My husband's name is Derek. We met in our mid-20s at a conference in downtown Chicago. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming when they need something from you, which I did not recognize then the way I recognize it now. We were married within 2 years. Marcus came along 14 months after that, and for a brief and luminous window, I believed we were exactly where we were supposed to be. Derek's mother is a woman named Gloria Harmon. She is 61 years old. President of the Naperville Heights Women's Fellowship, a fixture at Calvary Ridge Community Church, and the most quietly dangerous person I have ever encountered in my life. Gloria does not raise her voice. She does not make scenes. She builds consensus. She plants seeds of doubt in soft soil and then stands back and watches the garden grow in whatever shape serves her best. From the moment Derek brought me home to meet his family, Gloria studied me the way you study something you are trying to find the flaw in. She was always gracious, always offering second helpings and asking about my work, but her eyes told a different story. Her eyes said, "You are a placeholder, and eventually we will replace you with something more appropriate." Her other children, Derek's older brother Nathan, his wife Pamela, and his younger sister Trish, took their behavioral cues entirely from Gloria. If Gloria smiled at me, they smiled. If Gloria's smile did not reach her eyes, neither did theirs. They were a unit, a closed system, and I spent 4 years trying to find a door. I never found one, because there was never a door. I was never meant to get inside. The event that changed everything began on a Sunday in March, at Gloria's annual spring dinner. She hosts it every year at the house in Naperville, the same house Derek grew up in, the same house where every family photograph on the wall is arranged in a way that I do not appear in, even the ones taken after Marcus was born. We arrived at 6:30. Marcus was excited. He had drawn a card for his grandmother, a crayon rendering of the whole family standing in front of what he called Grandma's big house. He held it the entire drive there, careful not to crumple the edges. Gloria received it at the door with the warmth of someone accepting a dry cleaning ticket. She thanked him, set it on the entryway table without looking at it again, and turned her attention entirely to Derek. I noticed. Marcus noticed too, though he said nothing. He simply took my hand. Dinner was civil. It was always civil at the surface. The conversation moved through Derek's work, Nathan's recent home renovation, Trish's upcoming trip to Portugal. I was not asked about my work. I was not asked about anything, actually. I was a body at the table, present, but not included, the way furniture is present. Then, over dessert, Gloria set down her fork and made an announcement. She said that she had been thinking carefully about the family and about the tone of gatherings, and about what she described as the atmosphere of tension that had developed over recent years. She said that she believed it was time for the family to make a collective decision about the direction they wanted to go. I did not know, in that moment, that the decision was about me. She asked Derek's uncle Raymond, who was seated at the far end of the table, to please pass her the small notepad she had placed on the sideboard earlier. She had written something on it ahead of time. A motion, she called it. A proposal. She said she wanted to put it to a vote. The proposal was this: that Claire, my name, spoken by my mother-in-law in the third person, As though I were not sitting 6 feet away from her, be asked to step back from family gatherings for a period of time, to allow the family to heal from tensions that her presence had created. I want you to sit with that for a moment, friends. I need you to understand the architecture of what she did. She had prepared a notepad. She had placed it on the sideboard before we arrived. She had already written the motion before she looked across her dining room table and smiled at me and told me to try the peach cobbler. She had decided the outcome before the dinner began. Nathan raised his hand first, then Pamela, then Trish, then Derek's Aunt Carolyn, who had barely spoken to me in 4 years but raised her hand with the decisive energy of someone who had been waiting for permission. Then Raymond. Then 2 cousins I had only met twice. One by one, hands went up. I counted without meaning to. I counted because my mind was doing the thing it does when it cannot process an emotion. It turns to data instead. 11 hands. 11 people. My husband sat beside me. He did not raise his hand. He also did not lower anyone else's. Marcus, who had been quiet through all of this, who had been eating his cobbler and listening to the adult conversation with the careful attention that sensitive children develop when they grow up in homes full of subtext. Marcus looked up at me. His eyes were wide and very dark and very clear. "Mom," he said quietly, "why are they doing this? Why doesn't Grandma want you to come anymore?" The table went silent. I put my hand over his. I felt the smallness of his fingers beneath mine, and I thought, this is the only thing in this room that is real. Everything else is performance. Everything else is Gloria's stage and Gloria's script, and I have been playing a character in her story for 4 years without knowing my lines because she never gave them to me. I said, "Let's get your coat, sweetheart." I stood up. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at Gloria as I walked to the entryway and helped Marcus into his jacket. I did not look at Derek, who followed us out silently, who said nothing on the drive home, who sat beside me at a red light with his hands on the wheel and his jaw tight and no language at all for what had just happened. I did not need him to speak. I had already started calculating. That night, after Marcus was in bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold before I touched it. I opened my laptop. Not for revenge, not yet. For information. Here is what I knew. Because I am a CPA, and because I pay attention, and because the details that polite people pretend not to see are the ones that tell you the truest story. I knew that Gloria's house, the 4,000 square foot colonial in Naperville, the family seat, the site of the annual spring dinner, was not fully hers. It had been purchased jointly with money from a family trust established by Derek's late father, Edmund Harmon, who passed away 6 years ago. The trust had specific terms, which Edmund had shared with Derek, and which Derek had mentioned to me once in passing when we were still in the early years of marriage, when he still talked to me like a partner. I knew that Nathan, who had renovated his home that year, had used family trust funds to do it, not his own money. I had seen a document briefly, accidentally. The way you see things you were never meant to see on Derek's home office printer 18 months earlier. An authorization form. Trust disbursement. I had noted it the way I note everything. Filed it in the part of my brain I use for things that don't make sense yet. I knew that Trish's trip to Portugal, the one she'd been discussing over dinner with the bright energy of someone spending money that does not feel like her own. Trish had not worked a full-time job in 3 years. She described herself as a consultant, but I had seen no evidence of clients, no evidence of invoices, no evidence of any income at all. What I had seen, once, was a bank transfer notification on Derek's screen. Trish's name, a significant number, described in the memo line as a family loan. Family loans that go one direction, that are never discussed, that never appear on any repayment schedule, those are not loans. Those are disbursements. And disbursements from a family trust that are not authorized under the trust's terms are something else entirely. I did not have all the pieces that night. But I am very good at puzzles. And I had just been given an enormous amount of free time, courtesy of my mother-in-law's dining room table. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name is Diane. She is 54 years old, sharp as a blade, and she has handled my professional contracts for 7 years. She is the kind of woman who lets you finish your sentence before she starts dismantling what's wrong with it. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause, and then she said, "Claire, who is the trustee of Edmund Harmon's estate?" I said I wasn't certain. She said, "Find out." The next 6 days were the most disciplined of my life. I want to be clear about something. I did not set out to destroy anyone. That is not who I am. I set out to understand what I had been living inside of, and to protect my son, and to stop allowing people to treat me as though my presence in a room required their permission. But the more I understood, the more I saw. And the more I saw, the less I was able to pretend that what was happening was simply a family disagreement about personality differences. Through Diane, I initiated a formal review of the Harmon Family Trust documents, which are a matter of public record in DuPage County. What we found was not subtle. Edmund Harmon's trust had specific distribution rules. Annual allowances were established for each beneficiary. Any disbursement beyond those allowances required approval from the independent co-trustee, a position held by a family attorney named Gerald Marsh, who had been handling the Harmon estate since Edmund's death. What we also found was that Gerald Marsh had retired 2 years ago. His replacement had never been formally designated. And in the gap left by his retirement, over the span of 22 months, there had been 11 separate disbursements from the trust that fell outside the authorized annual amounts. Nathan's renovation. 3 separate wire transfers, totaling a significant sum, none of them recorded as trust-authorized distributions. Trish's family loans. 4 transfers, documented in the trust ledger only as administrative expenses. And one more thing. A thing I had not anticipated finding, but which, once I saw it, explained a great deal about why Gloria Harmon had been so determined to remove me from the family's orbit. Gloria herself was listed as the acting trustee following Gerald Marsh's retirement. She had appointed herself, quietly, without the formal process Edmund's trust required. And she had been, for 22 months, authorizing her own disbursements alongside her children's. Monthly amounts, described in her own handwriting, in the trust ledger as property maintenance for the Naperville house. The Naperville house whose mortgage had been paid off in full 7 years ago. There was no property maintenance. There was only Gloria, writing herself checks from money that belonged, in part, to Derek, to Marcus, to the next generation of Harmons that Edmund had intended to provide for. She had voted to remove me from family gatherings because I was the only person in that family who had the professional training to understand what she was doing. She hadn't been protecting the family's peace. She had been protecting her balance sheet. On the 8th day, Diane sent a certified letter to Gloria Harmon's address in Naperville. She sent a copy to Nathan, to Trish, and to the DuPage County Probate Court, which had jurisdiction over the Harmon estate. The letter outlined our findings, requested an immediate freeze on all trust activity pending formal review, and notified all parties that a petition for trustee removal had been filed on behalf of Derek Harmon as a named beneficiary of the Edmund Harmon Family Trust. I did not call Gloria to warn her. I did not call Nathan or Trish. I did not compose a message explaining myself or seeking understanding. I did not need their comprehension. I needed the courts. Diane told me the letters would arrive on a Thursday. I spent that Thursday morning taking Marcus to his favorite diner on Route 59, the one with the jukebox in the corner that still plays actual 45s. He ordered chocolate chip pancakes and apple juice and talked for 45 minutes about a book he was reading about ocean animals. He told me that a mantis shrimp can punch with the force of a bullet. He said it with the delight of someone who finds the world endlessly surprising. I thought, that is exactly right. The most devastating strikes come from things people do not take seriously. I do not know exactly what happened in Gloria Harmon's house that Thursday morning when the certified letter arrived. I was not there. I only know what Diane told me, and what Derek told me later, and what filtered through the carefully constructed wall of dignity I had built around myself and my son. Gloria called Derek within the hour. Then Nathan called. Then Trish. Derek sat in our kitchen and took the calls one by one, and when he hung up from the last one, he looked at me across the counter with an expression I had never seen on him before. Not anger, not betrayal, something more complicated. Something that looked almost like recognition, as though a room he had always assumed was empty had just turned on its lights. He said, "Did you know about all of this? About the trust?" I said, "I knew enough. And I knew that no one was going to protect Marcus's inheritance if I didn't." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "She called you a troublemaker." I said, "She called me that from a house that is partially owned by a trust she has been treating as her personal checking account. I can live with troublemaker." The probate court moved with the particular deliberate pace of institutions that have no reason to hurry. But they moved. A forensic accountant was appointed to review the trust records. Gerald Marsh, located in retirement in Tucson, Arizona, was contacted and confirmed that he had not designated a successor trustee before his retirement, and that Gloria's self-appointment had no legal basis under the trust's governing documents. Over the following weeks, the picture that emerged was detailed and damaging. Every family member who had received disbursements beyond their authorized annual amounts was notified of potential clawback liability: Nathan's renovation funds, Trish's loans, Gloria's 31 months of property maintenance payments that corresponded to no maintenance work that could be documented. The probate court froze the trust. Gloria's access was revoked pending the full accounting. A legitimate successor trustee, a professional fiduciary firm based in Chicago, was appointed to manage the estate going forward. Nathan's wife Pamela called me 3 weeks after the letters were sent. I let it go to voicemail. She said she wanted to talk. She said things had gotten out of hand. She said she hoped we could find a way to move forward as a family. I noticed she did not say, "I am sorry we raised our hands." I noticed she did not say, "Marcus deserved better than what we did at that dinner table." She said she hoped we could move forward, as though the distance between us was something that had simply appeared, weather-like, without cause or direction. I did not return the call. Some doors, when you finally stop trying to open them, turn out to have been the wrong doors all along. Trish reached out through Derek. She wanted me to understand that she had not known the trust disbursements were unauthorized, that she had trusted her mother, that she had believed everything was above board. I thought about that for a long time. I thought about what it means to benefit from something without asking questions. I thought about 11 hands rising at a dining room table. I thought about whether innocence and incuriosity are really the same thing, and I decided that they are not, and that the distinction matters, even when the outcome looks identical from the outside. I did not respond to Trish either, not because I wished her harm, but because a response would have required me to expend energy on her comfort, and I have learned, slowly and at considerable cost, that my energy is not an infinite resource and I must spend it on things that grow. Marcus asked me once, about a month after the spring dinner, whether we were going to go back to Grandma Gloria's house. We were in the car. He was looking out the window at the late April trees, that particular green that only lasts about 2 weeks before it deepens into summer and stops looking like something from a painting. I said, "I don't think so, baby." "Not for a while." He said, "Is it because of the vote?" I said, "Yes." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That wasn't very fair." I said, "No, it wasn't." He said, "Did you do something about it?" And I looked at him in the rearview mirror, this 7-year-old boy with his father's eyes and my mother's stubbornness and his own particular and irreplaceable soul, and I said, "Yes, I did." He nodded. The way children nod when an answer makes complete sense to them, as though fairness being restored is simply what they assumed would happen eventually, because someone who loves them is paying attention. I want to tell you, friends, that nod was the moment I felt something loosen in my chest that I had been carrying for 4 years. Not happiness exactly, not relief, something quieter and more permanent than either of those. Something that felt like the ground becoming solid under my feet again. Derek and I are in counseling now. I do not know what the outcome will be. I am not going to stand here and tell you that the story has a clean ending, because it does not, and because you deserve honesty more than you deserve a bow. What I can tell you is that I know, for the first time in years, exactly where I stand. That clarity, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it arrives dressed in certified letters and court appointments and conversations you would have given anything to avoid, that clarity is a gift. The forensic accounting is ongoing. Every person who received unauthorized disbursements from Edmund Harmon's trust has received a formal accounting of what they owe. Every person who benefited from Gloria's management of assets that were not solely hers to manage is now in the process of facing that accounting. Not because I am vindictive, but because Edmund Harmon worked for 40 years to build something that would outlast him and provide for his grandchildren, and someone used his death as an opportunity to redirect that provision toward herself, and that is not something a CPA with a clear conscience walks past. Marcus's share of the trust, Derek's share, is protected now. The fiduciary firm manages it transparently, with quarterly reports that I review every single time they arrive. There is something I want to say directly to you. If you are someone who has sat at a table and felt the specific shame of being voted against, not by strangers, but by people who ate your food and held your child and smiled at you over peach cobbler while they had already decided the outcome, I want you to hear this. The vote does not define you. It defines them. And the silence after the vote, the steady silence of someone who does not react but instead pays attention, that silence is not weakness. That silence is the sound of a person deciding what comes next. They called me a troublemaker. They thought that was an insult. From where I'm standing now, with my son's inheritance secured and my self-respect fully intact, I think it might be the finest thing they ever said about me. My name is Claire. I am 32 years old. I am a licensed CPA, a mother, and a woman who spent 4 years being quiet for the wrong reasons and learned, at the cost of one very illuminating spring dinner, what it feels like to be quiet for the right ones. I did not scream. I did not cry. I sent a letter. And that was enough. When the people who were supposed to welcome you decide instead to close the door, the quiet that follows is not emptiness, it is space. Space to finally hear your own instincts, to count what you actually have, to act from clarity instead of from the need to be accepted. Claire never tried to punish anyone. She simply stopped shrinking and in doing so made room for something more solid than approval, her son's security and her own. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI, crafted to bring you a moment of meaningful entertainment and to leave behind a lesson worth carrying into your own life.